The movie was already playing when she suddenly climbed into the back seat of my old car, closed the door behind her, and whispered, "The movie can wait." I froze with my hand still resting on the steering wheel. Outside, hundreds of cars sat beneath a dark summer sky, their headlights glowing softly against the giant drive-in screen. But my neighbor wasn't looking at the movie. She was looking at me with tears in her eyes, as if she had finally reached the one place where she felt safe enough to stop pretending she was okay. I had known Emily for almost 3 years, but I had never really known her. She lived in the small blue house next to mine, always keeping the porch light on, always watering the same row of flowers before sunrise. She was polite, quiet, and somehow always alone. I was a 38-year-old single father named Daniel, trying to raise my 8-year-old daughter while working long shifts at a repair shop and carrying the weight of a past I rarely talked about. My wife had died suddenly 2 years earlier, and since then, life had become a routine of school lunches, unpaid bills, overtime shifts, and pretending that my daughter didn't notice how often I cried when everyone else was asleep. If stories about second chances and unexpected kindness mean something to you, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share the story with someone who might need hope, and subscribe to True Kindness Stories for more stories about people who discover that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change an entire life. Emily and I had never been close. We exchanged groceries when one of us bought too much, shoveled each other's driveways after snowstorms, and occasionally talked across the fence. Then one Friday afternoon, I came home from work and found her sitting alone on her porch. There was something different about her that day. Her usual smile was gone, and beside her sat a small cardboard box filled with photographs. She looked at me and asked if I had ever been to the old drive-in theater outside town. I told her I hadn't been there since I was a teenager. She smiled faintly and said she had never been at all. Without thinking much about it, I invited her to come with my daughter and me that evening. My daughter was thrilled. Emily looked surprised, almost frightened by the invitation, but eventually nodded. That night, the three of us drove toward the theater in my aging blue sedan. My daughter sat in the front passenger seat, talking endlessly about the movie, while Emily sat quietly in the back with a blanket around her shoulders. For the first time, I noticed how tired she looked. Not ordinary tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for far too long. At the drive-in, we parked near the middle of the lot. My daughter climbed into the trunk area with pillows and snacks, completely absorbed in the movie. I laughed when she complained that I had brought the wrong candy. Emily laughed too, and for a few minutes, everything felt normal. Under the stars, surrounded by families and couples, she seemed almost happy. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen, and all the color disappeared from her face. She didn't answer. A minute later, it rang again. This time she turned it off. I didn't ask who it was. She simply stared at the giant movie screen while tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. I quietly asked if she was all right. She nodded, but her hands were trembling. Then she said she needed some air. Before I could respond, she opened the back door, climbed into the rear seat beside the blanket, and pulled the door shut. "The movie can wait," she whispered. I turned around, confused. She looked toward the front of the car, but she wasn't really seeing me. She was staring at the dashboard as if she were gathering enough courage to say something she had been hiding for years. Finally, she told me about her husband. He had died 6 months earlier. She had never told anyone in the neighborhood because she couldn't bear the questions. They had been married for 26 years. He had been sick for almost 2 years, and Emily had spent every night beside his hospital bed, believing that if she stayed awake, somehow she could keep him alive. After he died, everyone told her she was strong. They praised her for handling everything so well. But strength, she admitted, had become a prison. She had returned to the empty house every night, sat at the dining table where 2 plates used to be, and listened to the silence. She had stopped cooking. Stopped visiting friends. Stopped answering calls. She had even stopped opening the curtains because sunlight made the house feel emptier. The phone call that night had been from the hospital. They had found another box of her husband's belongings and wanted her to collect it. She couldn't do it. She couldn't walk into another room filled with things that belonged to the man she had lost. I listened without interrupting. There are moments when people don't need advice. They don't need someone to tell them that everything will be fine. They simply need someone willing to stay while their world falls apart. So I stayed. After a few minutes, my daughter quietly climbed out of the trunk and came into the back seat too. She didn't ask questions. She simply placed one of her favorite stuffed animals beside Emily and told her she could keep it for the night. Emily broke down completely. She covered her face, and my daughter wrapped her tiny arms around her. I watched them through the rearview mirror, feeling something inside me crack open. I realized grief wasn't something that belonged only to me. Everyone carried invisible losses. Some people simply became better at hiding them. The movie continued outside, explosions flashing across the windshield, but none of us watched. We stayed in that little car while Emily talked about her husband, my daughter talked about her mother, and I finally admitted how lonely I had been since losing my wife. For the first time in 2 years, I said out loud that I was afraid I would never feel happy again. Emily reached forward and placed her hand on my shoulder. She told me she understood. That night didn't magically fix anything. Emily still had an empty house waiting for her. I still had bills, responsibilities, and a daughter who sometimes missed her mother so badly that she cried herself to sleep. But something changed. The following morning, Emily knocked on my door. She was holding the stuffed animal my daughter had given her. She said she wanted to return it, but my daughter refused. Instead, she invited Emily to breakfast. That breakfast became a Sunday tradition. Soon, Emily started helping my daughter with school projects. My daughter began helping Emily in her garden. I repaired things around Emily's house, and she started leaving homemade food on our porch when she knew I had worked late. Months passed. One afternoon, I found Emily standing in her garden, holding the cardboard box of photographs she had once carried everywhere. This time, she wasn't crying. She had planted a small tree in memory of her husband. She told me she had finally understood something. Moving forward didn't mean leaving someone behind. It meant carrying their love into whatever life remained. I looked at the tree and realized she had taught me the same lesson. My wife wasn't coming back. Emily's husband wasn't coming back. We couldn't rewrite the past. But maybe we didn't have to. Sometimes a second chance doesn't arrive as a miracle. Sometimes it arrives as a neighbor asking you to watch a movie. Sometimes it climbs into the back seat, admits it's hurting, and trusts you enough to stay. A year after that night, we returned to the same drive-in. This time, Emily sat beside my daughter in the back seat, laughing as they argued over candy. I looked at her through the mirror and smiled. The movie began. Emily leaned forward and quietly said, "This time, we should probably watch it." I laughed. Then my daughter interrupted and said, "No. The movie can wait." We all laughed so hard that people in the cars around us turned to look. And for the first time, the silence inside my car didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like home. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may be silently struggling, and subscribe to True Kindness Stories. You never know when a simple act of kindness might become the reason someone chooses to keep going. And before you leave, comment, "The movie can wait," if you believe that sometimes being there for someone is more important than anything happening on the screen. Because sometimes, the greatest stories aren't the ones we watch. They're the ones we live.